pistols, prayer, and potluck. This is Armed Lutheran Radio.
Hi folks, welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio, a show about guns, hunting, competitive shooting, the natural right of self-defense, and what God's Word says about the issues surrounding gun rights and gun ownership. I'm your host, Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, and this is episode number 181. Thank you so much for making Armed Lutheran Radio a part of your week. This week is our variety show, tips from the entire cast, and I can tell you, as you can probably guess from the title of today's show, we're talking about gun violence, and we're talking about some of the suggested solutions that have been bandied about over the past week. Since last we spoke, there were 2 mass shootings in the U.S. just 24 hours apart, and that has reinvigorated the gun rights debate. As you know, first one was in El Paso, Texas, the second in Dayton, Ohio. One idea that seems to be gaining some traction, unfortunately, on the left and on the right, among people who are supposedly gun rights supporters, people like President Trump and people like Representative Dan Crenshaw, is this idea of the gun violence prevention order, also commonly referred to as a red flag law. Now, as I've mentioned before, I kind of like this idea in concept because it limits the impact of any restrictions to individuals who are potentially a threat, to individuals who are at risk, rather than broadly punishing millions of law-abiding gun owners who are not a threat. The problem is not with the concept. The problem is with the reality of how those laws would be implemented, because there are tons of problems. They undermine due process. There's great potential for abuse. You've got to answer questions like, who can apply for these gun violence prevention orders? How much evidence is required to have one approved? Who is going to actually judge the evidence that's presented and judge your fitness to own a gun? What process do you as an accused person have to defend yourself or to recover your property? Does the accused remain free to commit violence after the guns are confiscated? After all, if that person is too dangerous to own a gun or be in possession of a firearm, maybe they shouldn't be allowed to walk on the streets. Maybe they're too dangerous. Will the accused person undergo some sort of an evaluation? Will they be taken into custody temporarily? How long does the order last? But as we all know, with most laws that are crafted in the aftermath of some terrible tragedy, the devil's in the details. The overriding desire on the part of the politician is to be seen as doing something, even if that something doesn't really help. Even if it's counterproductive or dangerous to liberty, they desire, left or right, doesn't matter, the politician desires to be seen doing something. So today we're discussing gun violence, and we're discussing the idea of red flag laws with tips from Mia and from Sergeant Bill and from Pastor Bennett. Now, before we get started, I want to thank our sponsors. Yes, believe it or not, we have sponsors. They're called our listeners, the men and women who support this show through their individual financial contributions. Armed Lutheran Radio is listener funded, so that means you can be a sponsor of this show. We rely on the support of people like you to keep the lights on. When you purchase from the Armed Lutheran shop, when you buy my books, when you join the Reformation Gun Club, you help make all this possible. Thank you for your support. And speaking of the Reformation Gun Club, before we get started, we are having our first of what I hope will be many third Thursday online hangouts this week. It'll be Thursday night, 9 p.m. Central. That's 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. If you would like to join us, become a member of the Reformation Gun Club. It's our membership site. Go to armedlutheran.us/gun club. Sign up today. You get access to lots of exclusive content, some really cool Armed Lutheran swag, and invites to events like our third Thursday hangout. All right, that's it for me. Stick around, enjoy the show. I hope I'll see you or talk to you on Thursday night. If not, talk to you again next week.
You can help support Armed Lutheran Radio just by listening to the show. Go to armedlutheran.us/radio and download the Radio Public app and start listening.
I want to take a minute here to thank our partner, the Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network. If you're involved in a situation where you have to use your firearm in self-defense, you very well may find yourself in a legal battle against overzealous prosecutors or the families of the criminal who you shot or threatened, who are looking to deprive you of your freedom or your hard-earned savings. You may find yourself charged with a crime or facing a civil lawsuit even if you did nothing wrong. That's where Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network comes in. For a small yearly fee, they will provide you with money for attorneys, money for bail, consultations, and access to experts like Marty Hayes and Masad Ayub. Don't face the fight alone. Visit Armed Citizens Network today. Use the promo code ARMEDLutheran-25. Save $25 off your first year's membership, or you can grab the coupon on my website, armedlutheran.us. Sign up today. They will send you lots of cool resources, 8 instructional DVDs, and a book by Masad Ayub that I cannot recommend highly enough. Don't wait until you need their help. Be prepared. Sign up today. Visit armedcitizensnetwork.org.
It's time for Pastoral Pontifications with Pastor John Bennett.
Greetings, dear friends. Welcome to another segment of Pastoral Pontifications. Today I'm setting aside theology to talk about something that's been on my mind this past week, and that's red flag laws. If you've paid attention on social media lately, or paid attention to current events of what's being discussed in the wake of last weekend's horrific shootings, you've heard a lot about the push to enact these so-called red flag laws. Now, to give some the benefit of the doubt, they are well-intentioned, although grossly misled, believing that these laws will somehow reduce gun violence, quote-unquote. Or, to put it more accurately, bad people with bad intentions, often mentally disturbed, committing acts of unspeakable violence against other people while using an inanimate object. Now there, I've properly defined gun violence for our purposes today. And sadly, there's others that we can't give the benefit of the doubt because they just want to enact laws that will deprive you of your Second Amendment rights. But there are 3 really big problems with these red flag laws. I'll get to the other 2 in a bit, but to understand the first big problem, we have to look back at what we learned from the Sutherland Springs and Parkland shootings. In both of these cases, our government failed to protect her citizens. With the Sutherland Springs murderer, he had committed an act of physical battery against a toddler while enlisted in the Air Force, and he was convicted in the military court for his crime. Yet, the Air Force failed to report that detail to the FBI National Instant Criminal Background Check System, or NICS. So someone with violent behavior was still permitted to purchase a firearm. The negligence on the part of the federal government in the Parkland case is even more disturbing. Setting aside the refusal of the on-site school resource officer to respond, and the Broward County Sheriff's Department showing utter incompetence in their response, the FBI had received a tip on January 5th, 5.5 weeks before the murder of 17 students and staff at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. In that tip, a family member warned that this disturbed individual was violent, had a desire to, quote, kill people. And this family member worried about, quote, the potential of him conducting a school shooting. The FBI did nothing. Now on to the incompetence of the Broward County Sheriff's Department. The shooter had also been the subject of more than 36 police calls beginning when he was only 9. Because of his disciplinary record with both the police and the high school, he was well known to the Broward County Sheriff's Department. And here's where it gets interesting. Broward County is one of the counties in Florida that has a 5-day waiting period and requires an additional background check in order to purchase a firearm. Yet, that very county that the mass murderer was known to permitted him to purchase an AR-15. And just 3 months before the shooting, a family friend that the mass murderer was living with called into the Palm Beach County Sheriff's 911 operator after an altercation with the shooter, again prior to him committing this horrific act, saying, quote, "I need someone here because I'm afraid he comes back and he has a lot of weapons." And, quote, "It's not the first time you put a gun on somebody's head," unquote. But there was no follow-up. The point of all of this is that if these red flag laws would actually be effective in reducing the number of innocent people killed by evil and disturbed individuals, then why do we have two clear cases where there were many red flags that the local and federal government could have legally used to prohibit would-be mass murderers from purchasing firearms? Yet, the government failed. Can we really trust a government to add in another control measure to keep guns out of the hands of people that it deems a danger to society, when it can't keep firearms out of the hands of people it's already supposed to be preventing from owning them? I say when the government can actually demonstrate that they can effectively and efficiently keep firearms out of the hands of those who are already known to the authorities to be violent and or mentally unstable, then we can begin to have a discussion on these proposed red flag regulations that would not violate a citizen's due process rights, and that's very key. Any quote-unquote solution to quote-unquote do something must not violate due process rights. So that's the first big problem with these red flag laws. The government has already demonstrated a certain level of incompetence in their responsibility to prohibit dangerous individuals from owning firearms. So now on to the second big problem. The way these red flag laws are intended to work is that if a person is reported to the authorities as being dangerous or unstable, the authorities can then, without any actual evidence, seize that individual's firearm, after which that individual would have to prove that they were reasonable, responsible, and not a danger to others. So for a second big problem, these laws throw out the legal principle of the presumption of innocence. In essence, these laws would force a citizen with no criminal record to prove that they're not a criminal and aren't predisposed to committing acts of violence. Now for the third big problem. Who gets to decide? In some of these states that have already enacted these kind of laws, any rando can call in and report a person. There's been several threads on social media where some woke leftist posted a picture of some guy minding his own business while lawfully open carrying and making the comment that these are the kind of people red flag laws are meant to prevent from owning firearms. Think about that for just a moment. Yes, there are actually people in this country that believe that the simple act of owning a firearm is evidence of mental instability and violent tendencies. Imagine going out in public and someone notices that bulge from your waistband, or sees the butt of your pistol peek out from under your shirt while you're reaching down to pick up a can of chili off the bottom shelf of your local grocery store. Then that person follows you home and calls the authorities, reporting you under these red flag laws. Or if you desire to carry commando, aka open carry, and someone reports you, or worse yet, calls 911 reporting that there is a man in the store with a gun, which by the way is just one of the reasons I'm not fond of open carry. Not only could you lose your firearms and then be forced to prove your innocence, you could even lose your liberty or your life, depending on how agitated or nervous those first responding officers might be. Remember the story of Philandro Castile? He notified the officer during a routine traffic stop that he had a carry permit and was armed. That officer was nervous, and when Philandro was reaching for his wallet, that officer thought he was reaching for a gun and shot and killed Mr. Castile. That was without red flag laws. Now enact a law where officers have to knock on the door of someone they've been told is dangerous and owns guns. What could go wrong? In a world where we're dealing with an entire demographic of people who live in a state of being constantly offended, giving the power to random strangers to determine who they think is a threat to the public is a recipe for absolute chaos, anarchy, and the rampant violation of our civil right to keep and bear arms. When the left demands that our politicians do something, you should be incredibly nervous when politicians, At least the ones who claim to support the Second Amendment begin to entertain their demands. Heck, even Dan Crenshaw has proven to be a disappointment when it comes to protecting our Second Amendment rights by caving to the calls for red flag laws. What should be our response? If you're stuck in a blue state with Democrat senators and congressional reps, there isn't much that you can do directly. What you can do is support your local gun rights organizations and national organizations like the Second Amendment Foundation and Gun Owners of America. If you're like me, one of the disgruntled lifetime NRA members, be sure to support those who are organizing to reform the NRA. Now, if you are fortunate enough to have a Republican senator or congressional representative for your district, write them, call their offices, encourage them to hold the line when it comes to our Second Amendment rights, express your concerns for these red flag laws, and ask them to work toward fixing the holes in the NICS system and reforming the regulations for properly reporting violent and mentally disturbed individuals so that the government can be better equipped to actually do what they're supposed to do. Well, that's all for this week. If you have any questions, topics, articles, or feedback that you'd like me to pontificate about, shoot me a message through the Armed Lutheran feedback page or through the contact form at stjohnswillowcreek.org. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you next time.
John Bennett is the pastor at St. John's Lutheran Church in Willow Creek, Minnesota. For more information, visit stjohnswillowcreek.org.
Hey guys, it's Mia here. If you follow me on social media, you know that I often share morning inspiration. Many people ask how I can keep this up every day. Well, it starts with my morning readings and that perfect cup of coffee. The official Dunkin' Donuts shop provides coffee lovers with everything they need, from K-Cup pods, original blended coffee, tea, drinkware, and more. Who doesn't want Dunkin' delivered to their front door? Shop today at www.armedlutheran.us/coffee and help support Armed Lutheran Radio today.
Time now for Mia's Motivations with Mia Anstine.
Hey guys, it has been quite the week, and I really wanted to talk to you today about red flag laws. In the past, I talked to you about the DC project and how I headed to Washington, D.C., to Capitol Hill to talk to our legislators about the Second Amendment and to put a different face to gun owners. And while we were there, I had really great conversations with not just my state's lawmakers, but also those of other states. And part of what we did was not only to express our support of the Second Amendment, but we also had discussions with people, lawmakers, who are not going to change their minds, that are leaning anti-gun. We had conversations with them that included not just red flag laws, but other items. And part of our conversations they entailed that we aren't going to change their minds, but if you're going to pass this law, we want you to make it better. And in some of the offices, when we talked about red flag laws, there were some key points that we really wanted to focus on. And I feel like with the recent shootings and the uproar of talk about the red flag laws and other laws, everybody needs to know what the red flags are with the red flag laws. And I know that sounds confusing, but really there are a lot of things in the red flag laws that will make innocent citizens criminals or make innocent citizens victims. And we really don't want to see that. So I wanted to highlight some things that we discussed. Audra Brown, she is running for the House in New Mexico. She was a part of the team that I was on, and she has really researched the history of red flag laws in several states. In Colorado, we only recently received red flag laws, so we don't have a great history to take from. I do have a lot of history for universal background checks. If you'd like information on that, reach out to me and I can help you with that. But as far as red flag laws, some key points that she says is if your legislators are considering putting these laws in place, there are some things that they need to add in there to protect the innocent and also to protect the police officers. And I really stress that because I have a lot of friends who are police officers. And so let me just dive right into this. One of the things is there should be a notification of court date, and the notification should be served like a subpoena. This should not be simply mailed, and it shouldn't be lost in the mail where you're going to miss a court date. So that needs to be done for the court dates, and there also needs to be some way to confirm that that recipient has been notified. Another thing is the procedures for rescheduling a date. There should be a procedure to reschedule a date, because sometimes people are, and this is coming from states that have already had the red flag laws. What happens is a person has gone on vacation, or a person is sick and they're in the hospital, and they're simply mailing these notifications of court dates. And this is after the red flag has already been in place and firearms have been taken. So they need to be notified of the court date, but they're sending these in the mail. And if this person is not home, they're not receiving the notifications. And if they don't receive the notification, then they never can get their firearms back. And in some cases, they never get their freedoms back. In other words, their Second Amendment right. So there has to be a procedure for rescheduling. And if you receive a notice that you have to be there on August 15th at 1 p.m. and you can't do that, then that you should be able to reschedule. And this is a big one because it's happening in other states where they're not allowing them to reschedule. So that needs to be included. Another thing is there should be an active procedure that will ensure that the subject who has been accused, they have all reasonable assistance and the opportunity to address the order, and they must have their property returned. And that's another big one, because a lot of these people, they are not given, they're not innocent until proven guilty. They are guilty until proven innocent, and then they're still guilty. They're not receiving their property or their rights back in some cases. So there needs to be a guarantee that they will receive their property back if they're found innocent, and they will receive their rights back. There needs to also be, for the law enforcement officers, a protection. They need liability protection, and they also need funding for the storage of these firearms. The law enforcement offices cannot be held responsible for these firearms, so they need to be insured, and that's something that they need to be held accountable. I mean, if they're seizing the firearms, they need to be held accountable for that. But they also need protection because they don't have the storage facilities to keep a lot of these firearms, and so they're going to have to use another outlet for storage. And if they have to store firearms somewhere else, then it's off their premises or something like that. The firearms may be displaced. It's really confusing, and it's really difficult to explain because it is not a clear and simple process like they're describing on the news and everywhere that you're seeing right now. When police officers are seizing firearms, they maybe could have a third party who would witness this to see exactly what firearms are being taken. A third party, somebody who is not associated with the office. Maybe they could have a third party actually review the subpoena to make sure that it's legit, make sure who the accuser is who they say they are, and that their relationship to the accusee is exactly what they say it is. And hopefully that would alleviate some of the pressure on the police officers and release their liability for guns that maybe they are saying aren't being returned, that are, and that they're saying they took, that they really didn't, so forth. And it's really not a cut and dry, simple thing. So police officers, please speak out and speak up about how this is going to be a challenge, both logistically and financially for your precincts. There also, for the accusee, there should be a protection for financial losses, because you may miss work for this, or you may have property that's damaged. There have been homes that have been broken and items that are destroyed. So there should be some type of protection for the accusee for financial loss. And a lot of this I'm speaking of is if you are found innocent, if somebody calls the red flag on you, this should be you should be compensated. You should be compensated for your pay if you had to miss work. So In short, there should be procedures that ensure the active protection and the restoration of all property and all rights to those who are not convicted of any crime prior to the execution of the order. And I really like Audra Brown said prior to the execution of the order. I really like that because what's happening is people are not getting this ahead of time, and it's pretty hard to get that back if you aren't guaranteed it. A friend of mine also who has attended conferences and meetings on Capitol Hill from Florida, she actually was a victim of rape. She has friends that she knows who are victims of domestic violence, and she really stresses that there needs to be an option for an immediate protest. Your court date should just be bumped up to immediately. And she really emphasizes this because she knows somebody in one of these red flag law states who had a restraining order on her husband. She's attempting to get a divorce because he had abused her, and the husband knew she had firearms, so he called in red flag law. So she ended up being unarmed for 2 weeks, and nothing terminal happened, but you can imagine. So there's a lot of red flags in the red flag law. I hope that you will educate yourself. I hope you will educate others. If there are other key points that you think are important, I hope that you will reach out and let us know. And I look forward to talking to you about better topics in the future. Bye, guys.
You can read more from Mia, watch her YouTube videos, or check out her podcast, Mac Outdoors with Mia and Leah, at miaanstine.com.
Hey there, this is Sergeant Bill. After the successful completion of a match, Lloyd and I like to get together and top it off with a celebratory cigar. We get our post-match cigars from Cigar Page, home of America's best cigar deals. Visit armedlutheran.us/cigar and get a great deal. And also, help support Armed Lutheran Radio.
Time now for another Ballistic Minute with Sergeant Bill Sylvia.
Hey everybody, I'm Sergeant Bill, and this is your Ballistic Minute. Today we're going to talk about gun violence and gun violence prevention. Now, there's been a couple mass shootings lately, and everybody's been talking about gun violence and gun violence prevention. I actually think the term gun violence is kind of silly to me. Guns aren't violent. None of my guns have ever been violent. I take them and I shoot them. Do they have the potential of being violent? Yeah, I guess so. But it's all in the user. The violence is not the gun. So gun violence is kind of a misnomer. They should say gun-related violence. Anyways, when it comes to gun violence prevention, I believe in self-protection. It is up to you to protect yourself and to be prepared. There's a saying that we like to say in the police department that when you need the police, they're only a few minutes away. So when you need us right away, we're not there. Police departments always talk about trying to be proactive, but the truth of it is police are, and even security, are reactive. We always act on stuff that has already happened. Okay, we try to act on stuff ahead of time, but that's not the way it works. Truth be told, when it comes to your self-protection and you get in a scenario or a scene that something bad is happening, you can't wait for the police. You have to take care of it yourself. So self-protection and self-preservation should cause any reasonable person, in my mind, to want to get a firearm, to get trained, and to practice so that you're very proficient with it. Now, I say you should carry the biggest gun that you can, reasonably conceal. Now, I don't mean like a .44 Magnum or something like that. I mean like a 9mm. In like a Glock 17 or Glock 19, or I'm just using Glock as an example because that's kind of what comes to my mind when I think of carry guns. But 9mm is the most common, most widely used, and most readily available ammunition you can get. So it's easy to practice with. It's easy to get good self-defense ammo, and you can get it just about anywhere, any Walmart or sporting goods store, except for one that doesn't like guns anymore because they're evil, I guess. But we won't talk about them. So besides doing that and, getting that firearm, you need to get trained. And now when I say get trained, I mean go find a professional trainer that can show you how to hold the gun, how to line up the sights, how to pull the trigger, how to transition from target to target, all the skills that you would need to be able to, effectively utilize that tool that you are going to have with you. Now, you should also get some emergency medical training and get some of the equipment and be ready to use it, like a tourniquet or some bandages or, just basic stuff. So there's classes you can get through some fire departments, some community colleges, and some professional firearms training schools actually teach some emergency medical training. This kind of training is the best stuff you can have because, a mass shooting like this happens and it takes a few minutes for lots of people to get injured or killed, and it's going to take hours to help with stabilizing those people or saving them, or you get somebody who gets shot and they're bleeding out, they might not die if they can get some medical training or some equipment on them, a tourniquet or some bandages, some pressure wounds or something to keep them from bleeding out and basically just leaking out. So get some tourniquets, bandages, stuff like that. Have some medical equipment and keep it in your car. I keep a very well-stocked first aid kit in my car, very large EMT style first aid kit, and maybe even carry a tourniquet. I don't carry one myself, but I know lots of people that carry, like in an ankle holster in a pocket, a tourniquet that's wrapped up in a little pouch with some gauze and stuff like that. Really what it comes down to is you need to plan for the worst, and you also need to train for it too. Planning is wonderful, but if you don't train, the planning is worthless because you're planning to fail. You train to succeed. So train on your medical equipment, train on your gun, train on the things that you need to help protect yourself. Plan for the worst and train for it. So if an active shooter event happens, and you can, I say take the fight to them. Now, if you have your family with you, you got your kids with you or something like that, take care of your family first. That's the most important thing. But if it's you, personally for me, my wife and I both have planned that if we're out with our kids and we got little ones, that my wife's going to take the kids and she's going to protect them and get them out of there. And I'm going to run block. I'm going to be the blocker. I'm going after that bad guy and I'm going to take the fight to him. We have even trained with our kids and practiced with them so that they know that if something like that happens or we're out in a store or something and they hear gunfire, that if they see daddy draw his gun and they see mommy draw their gun, they know we need to get out of there and we need to go find help and call the police. Run, hide, call for help. That's what they know to do, and that's what we practice all the time. Limit your exposure by planning ahead when going to large populated events or locations. Okay, so if you're going to a downtown club area, know how you're getting there, know how you're getting home, know where the police like to hang out, know what the danger areas are. If you've ever been down there before, or if you've never been down there before, at least keep your eyes open, know what's going on and where everything is at. Have your phone charged up and ready to go. So like I said, know where you are. If you're in a building, if you're in like a Walmart or something, or a super center, or big furniture store, I don't know, whatever it may be, know where your exits are, or even a movie theater. Know where your exits are ahead of time. It's just common sense to me to walk into a building and go, if I had to get out of here quickly, how am I getting out of here? As soon as I walk in. Also know where you'll meet if you're in a group and you get separated. So, that's easy. I go out with my family all the time. We go to a movie theater, say, hey, if we get, separated, we'll meet out at the car. Know your surroundings. So see the people around you. If somebody looks out of place, they're probably out of place. You don't have to be, super CIA police officer, airborne ranger to figure out if somebody looks like they belong somewhere, or if somebody's scoping the people in the crowd and everybody else is just minding their own business. Know where the police are if you're out at a big event. they're usually hanging out at certain spots, and they do that on purpose so that when you see them there, you know if, hey, something happens, I need to go back over there because that's where they're at and I can get help. Know what is cover and what is concealment. So if you're walking along and you're out in a busy city street and there's a big block party event and you're out there and the buildings are all really thin-walled buildings, but the front of them are brick buildings, hey, you know those cinder block or brick buildings, that's probably going to be some good cover that will actually stop bullets. And if there's any medical equipment out there, know where that stuff is too. Lots of buildings these days, lots of big places like Walmart's, Target, stuff like that. When you walk in, have an defibrillator on the wall right there by the entrance. So if something like that happens, doesn't have to be a shooting, still an emergency situation, you know, hey, so-and-so, guy's having a heart attack, run up to the front, the defibrillator's right over by the front door on the right side. Know where all this stuff is. It seems like a lot, but this is talking about it's a lot. Just actually doing it is very simple and very little. Okay, so all these active shooter events they're not caused or a product of guns. Any guns. I don't care what type of guns. Even if we had full auto guns, it's not the cause of active shooter events. And regulating law-abiding citizens has not and will not ever stop a madman with a gun from committing violence. In China and England, they basically have no guns in their societies. And they have mass stabbings. And people get killed there, just like they do with shootings here in America. You cannot legislate away evil, crazy people from existence. You cannot legislate crazy, evil people from doing crazy, evil people stuff. It's plain and simple. If you don't think it's simple, you need to think about that, because laws only apply to the law-abiding citizen. So I'll wrap it up with this. If you prepare for the worst, you will be more ready than most people will. If you fail to prepare and you don't make these decisions in life of what you need to do for your future and for your safety, prepare to live with the consequences of those decisions. I'm Sergeant Bill, and this has been your Ballistic Minute.
Sergeant Bill Sylvia is a veteran of the Dallas Police Force and a masterclass competitive shooter. You can check out his YouTube videos at armedlutheran.us/Sergeant Bill. For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.us. Check out the Facebook page, The Armed Lutheran, or join our Facebook group, Fans of Armed Lutheran Radio. If you like what you hear, please leave us a comment on our feedback page at armedlutheran.us/feedback or a review on iTunes and let us know what you think. Thank you for listening to Armed Lutheran Radio.